Majority of us have been on the waters most of our life in one kind of boat or another. But when the canoes come here in August, it's going to be one of the biggest tides of the year. So it's going to be big back eddies and big run out. They're going to have fun.
Yeah, they better check the tide book and
Yeah,
come with the tide.
whichever way they're coming from.
Yeah, north or south, and that
So to just give you kind of a lay of the land, Cape Mudge Lighthouse is located right here. The Canberra River Band is located right here. Cape Mudge Village is right here. To give you, and Seymour Narrows is just up this way. Flooding is in this direction. And when the tide runs out, ebb, it's running in that direction, north direction. Tide around the area where you're going to be coming into Canberra River. To give you an idea on any particular tide, what happens towards the ferry's berth in Canberra River is about a half hour to 45 minutes before the tide changes. It becomes slack here and changes on the Canberra River side, and the tide works its way across.
like if they're bucking the tide and that, they should be right close to the beach, not just they're taking the back eddies.
Yeah.
Then take advantage of going with the tides. Like if they're coming up from the south, they should be catching the ebb tide, and they're coming north, well, they catch a flood.
And there's a little bit of a breeze one way or the other. With big tides like that, you'll wind up with a chop, a little bit of a choppy weather. So you've got to keep that in mind when they're around the lighthouse area. You get tidal chop and everything. So a little bit of wind will make it worse.
Yeah.
Got to do is pick out the best tides when the tide is just about ready to change. Would be the best bet. Hit the
slack
lighthouse
water.
if you're coming from the south just before high water, and the opposite if you're coming through the Narrows, because that's another treacherous place. So you got to pick the slackest tide you can.
The tide is much stronger, especially on a flood tide on the Quadra side. So if you're coming along this shoreline, it's going to be a lot less tide for you. Another thing is during about midway tide along the village there's a good, what we refer to as a back eddy. So as the tide's flooding in this direction here, you can make along this shoreline relatively easily. Talk a bit briefly about if you're coming up in the day and it's a little bit windy. Now, typically here when you have a flood and it's blowing southeast, it does get very choppy from the lighthouse south. To give you an idea, it's probably the worst area, and it does get quite choppy in here as well. Now, one thing always to look out for is as it's flooding, if it's a mid-tide like I was saying before, you'd be safe to go along the shoreline by Cape Mudge Village because of the back eddy along there at that time.
Yeah. Depends on what side you're traveling. Some people travel on the Vancouver Island side. So, you know, it'll be, once you get past Cape Mudge, like when it's running out here, it's flooding on the other side. So they'll probably be in the back eddy along the beach over the other side coming from Comox. Yeah, that's a flood tide. And it'll be flooding, and then, like I say, once the tide starts slackening off, such big tides, they change really quick. And you got to catch it. Like I say, they'll probably be in back eddies on the other side, so they got to start heading across to meet the tide that's running out to get this way, so they're not paddling to beat heck. Otherwise, even outboards can't hardly move in this tide. So they got to really keep that in mind when they're making a move.
Just to note that the tide, it actually floods to the north from Cape Lazo to Salmon Point. Salmon Point, is my understanding, is the split between the two tides. When the tide floods to the south from Seymour Narrows, but it floods to the north from Cape Lazo, and they meet there. So just a little bit of information about that. And Salmon Point on the chart is called Cahushan Point on the charts, but we all call it Salmon Point. It's probably the most prominent point between Campbell River and Cape Lazo. It's pretty obvious on the chart which one that is. So that's a little addition of information for you guys to consider when you're coming from the southern waters. Just for the sake of discussion, is noon. It's going to turn to flood. Well, really, you could start moving an hour before that.
Yeah.
Because everything's starting to slow right down as far as ebb tide's concerned, and getting ready to turn the other way. And then the canoers have the opportunity to take a good chunk of territory with the flood tide.
Catch the last part of the ebb tide and the back eddies.
Yep, for sure.
Paddle safe, bail fast.